This right here is some Giga Chad energy from Shinpei. Soon as I saw this line, soon as I saw this man say, I don't feel the same way, after Mio straight up confessed to him, I was like, yo, is this like, is this like a Natsuki Subaru moment, like from ReZero? Like, if anyone remembers, like, the iconic scene from Season 1 of ReZero that kind of exploded on the internet, countless memes were created of it, and there was just so much backlash for it. And the scene I'm talking about in particular, you probably already know, is when Subaru was having that emotional moment with Rim, and Rim was having an emotional moment with him, and Subaru was down in the dumps, Rim has been there for him, he straight up denies Rim's feelings, is like, I love Emilia. And when I saw this scene, like, Shinpei just straight up denies Mio, is like, I don't feel the same way, and I love Ushio. I was like, yo, this man's Giga Chad. Like, he's a Giga Chad, and this man is channeling some Subaru energy. It's hilarious. Like, legit, this is probably, if I had to say, the funniest moment of the entirety of this anime, this is the funniest moment for the wrong reasons, obviously, but just the way he just says no to Mio, it's just like, whoa, that's freaking harsh. But to be fair, Mio kind of deserved it in her own way, because, like, if we look at this scene, and we go back to, like, you know, a previous scene where she's, like, having a discussion, you know, and she denies him, and it's just like, she had it all coming. He got friend zoned, and so seeing the scene right after that, when Shinpei basically is like, you know, I don't feel the same way, I'm like, she kind of had it. That was karma in its own way, denying the feelings after the man literally died for her multiple times in the different loops, and she obviously got to see that through, you know, these pseudo loops that was already talked about even within this episode. So it's just like, everything is kind of karma for Mio. It's kind of hilarious, and like I said, I have a lot of respect for Shinpei just for channeling that Giga Chad energy. But okay, let's get off that. Let's actually, you know, talk about the episode, okay? Let's talk about the content within this, and, you know, stuff that really is pushing the plot forward, which I guess in its own way, the Mio stuff is pushing the plot forward like a subplot, because that's been a big thing since the very beginning, actually. I guess let's talk about that. I know you guys want me to probably talk about Ushio and all that stuff that happened at the end of the episode, but let's talk about this plot point. So, Mio getting her romantic feelings denied. I think that this is a good thing that the story outright just did it right now, instead of waiting till, like, the final episode, or, you know, just leaving it in a very blank way, or just not really telling us. I'm very happy that the series was just straight up and told us, like it was, that Shinpei does not have romantic feelings for Mio. He loves Ushio, but on top of that, you know, he wants to be able to focus on everything in front of him first before anything else, and I respect Shinpei's character, and I also respect Mio's character. And the reason for that, despite me memeing on it, saying karma, etc., I do think that it's very nice to see Mio just be straight up and try to confess and be honest, instead of trying to hide in the background and not say anything. She was pushed forward to actually finally say her true feelings to Shinpei, even though obviously she got her feelings denied. It's nice to see that step forward from her character. It's basically development showing she has a little bit more confidence in herself, and she's willing to say the words she wants to say, and even if she knows that she might not get what she wants, she said it anyways. And the same happens earlier on the scene, you know, when she denies someone else's feelings as well. Just everything about that, the first half of the episode is kind of build up for that, and I appreciate just everything about this episode, at least when it, you know, focuses around Mio and the love and all that. It just, we push that subplot forward and kind of put in its own way a bow on top, because let's say, hypothetically, you know, Shinpei gets with Ushio, we won't have those individuals, or even in the storyline, just people discussing that, you know, he did Mio dirty, you know, he properly said no to her. So just good. It's good. I'm happy by the way it was settled. There's nothing I really have in terms of complaints towards that regard whatsoever. It definitely will settle a lot of different ships and stuff. You know how it comes to anime and manga fans, people get into all those ships and the ship arguments and all that, and I'm glad we're not going to have to deal with that for this story. So, let's focus on some other content from this episode. So, a lot of good stuff from this episode, especially finding out more about, you know, Ushio's location, and confirming basically a theory that I've been talking about for weeks now. Like, here, I'll try to find the scene here. Yeah, basically, you have all of, like, Shide's, like, shadows, and, Heine's shadows going in and trying to find Ushio, and obviously Shinpei's trying to find Ushio before them, and that's kind of the main central plot of the episode, besides romantic stuff, and I think that the way this was handled makes perfect sense. It didn't come out of left field and side blind you, because if you have been paying attention to the narrative, you've been watching since the very beginning, obviously, if you're at the, this point in the story, everything kind of makes sense that, Ushio at the end of the episode would be alive. Like, it makes perfect sense. It's not something that feels like a fake out. It's not something that feels forced. Everything makes perfect sense, at least with the time travel aspect that's been literally present since the very beginning of the story. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about Ushio being alive and why it's an okay thing, and why, I'm personally not upset with it, because there's a few things that do need to be clarified. So, first things first, death in this series, in Summertime Rendering, is used in a very similar, there's differences, but a very similar way as, let's say, ReZero and Steins Gate. Those two series come to mind when I think of death, because obviously time travel is in its own way a part of those stories, and death isn't necessarily the end for the said characters, because there is ways for them to potentially come back. We have seen this already multiple times with different loops within Summertime Rendering. It allows the writers of said series, when it just comes to time traveling, to be able to add emotional, tear-jerking moments of characters dying and being heroic or whatever, showing their true colors at the face of death, and then bringing them back, and it doesn't necessarily feel cheap because it's always been present within the story. Obviously, there is different ways that can go, and it can still feel cheap and feel really bad, because time traveling is very hard to write. I would say, in terms of a lot of anime, just stories in general, writing time travel into your story could be the worst or the best thing for an entire plot, because time travel could easily make things so convoluted that people obviously won't understand it, but also it makes things to where it's like, oh, nothing really matters, and there isn't any consequences. And then you have others that perfectly formulate time travel, and they put restrictions and different elements to it that make it to where, even though characters can come back, there's restrictions to where sometimes those characters will not be able to return. Basically, finding out that there is a so-called end of the loops. If Shinpei dies too much, his lives will run out. He doesn't have infinite lives, and he goes past a certain threshold where he can't redo certain things. It's very similar to the elements of ReZero, where if Subaru passes a certain threshold, he can't go back to that certain point. He can't change time. Now, obviously, you can argue with Summertime Rendering that it is probably still possible to even save Hizuru that died in the last episode, and what I mean by that is basically, we've already seen Shinpei use his time travel ability in many different ways. For instance, we've seen the negatives and the positives of it. He's went back multiple days, basically to the very beginning when he first arrived to the island. We've seen him go even further back with these memories, and he's even able to somewhat communicate with people very far into the past. So there's a lot of things in terms of mystery with the ability itself that makes you wonder if it's possible to save those that have already died. For instance, Hizuru. Now, personally, I don't think Hizuru should come back. I do think that it would definitely undermine her emotional ending, especially with her declaration at the end and all that, if she was to come back. The only purpose of bringing Hizuru back, I would say, would be for one final conversation between her and her brother, maybe like a really good goodbye, or maybe Shinpei just feeling good about himself because he doesn't want to be responsible for Hizuru's death. One or the other. But I don't think bringing her back would be a good thing. I think it would be the very opposite of what Ushio's return would signify in this week's episode. So let's talk about that, the contrast between it. The reason why Ushio makes sense to come back is because the story hasn't tried to act like she's permanently dead. I mean, literally, you had Heine acting out and thinking something very off with, Shinpei, with the little shell in his pocket, to also Shide and how he reacted to it. The series hasn't tried to hide the fact that Ushio was coming back. It hasn't. It really has not tried to hide that, but also, if anyone has once again been paying attention to the narrative and the different loops, you'll see that there was always another Ushio that was definitely present within the storyline. I mean, once again, this Ushio that is the Shadow kind of first appeared within the storyline like episode 3, episode 4, as a shadow on the day of the festival, came from the ocean, and then started to travel with Shinpei. And it was always up in the air if that Shadow Ushio was still in the ocean or not. It was always that little thing in the corner we didn't think much about, but it was definitely always there in terms of could be used or introduced in the plot to bring her back. And in this case, it was. So it's nothing that came out of left field and really makes me upset. I feel like it was perfectly handled, and it perfectly fits with the narrative of the time travel that's already been established with the story. So I have no complaints for that, and I think that in terms of the memories coming back, which has already been established with like pseudo loops and stuff, to the whole scan ability of Shide, I think that there's nothing off whatsoever. This is a really, really solid episode with reestablishing or bringing characters back from the dead. Now, besides that, if there is one thing that does need to be talked about, I want to say rest in peace, like, Gilly or whoever's name is, you know, the little infant Shadow. Rest in peace, this poor lad. Like, seriously, rest in peace, because I love the character. Even though he had no dialogue, he was basically like just a walking tall shadow baby. I was just like, he was kind of done dirty. He was killed off like that by Shide, and I was like, that's kind of messed up. He didn't deserve that. He didn't at all. But, yeah, this is, a really solid episode, and I can't wait for what's next for Summertime Rendering, because we're getting into the final part of the story, basically, the final confrontation between Shinpei versus Haine slash, you know, Shide. So, yeah. You have a lot to look forward to. But I guess I want to wrap up this video here. If you enjoyed it, you know, please do drop me a like. It does help me out a lot, and I would always greatly appreciate it. It makes my day. And if you want to see more content for Summertime Rendering or other stuff as well, hit that subscribe button down below, because it allows more of my videos to pop up into your feed and see when I am ever discussing news or other anime that might actually interest you. But with that, be safe, stay healthy, everyone. Chibi out.